She's nobody, my daughter-in-law whispered to the bank manager, blocking me from the counter. I stood there in stunned silence, but what I did next changed everything and left my entire family in shock. I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far my story has reached. I never imagined that at 70 years old, I'd be standing in a bank lobby, being dismissed like I didn't exist. But that Tuesday afternoon in March, watching my daughter-in-law Cassandra treat me like an embarrassment, I realized I'd been blind to what was happening in my own family for far too long. My name is Eleanor Hartfield, and for the past 3 years, I've been living in the guest cottage behind my son's property in the affluent neighborhood of Willow Creek Estates. After my husband Gerald passed away from a sudden heart attack, my son Preston insisted I move closer to family. "Mom, we want you near us," he'd said, his eyes warm and sincere, holding my hands across the table at the cafe where we'd met to discuss my future. "The cottage is just sitting empty behind the main house. You'd be doing us a favor by using it." I'd been hesitant at first, deeply hesitant. I valued my independence, cherished my small townhouse in Riverside Park where I'd lived for 23 years. It was the home where Gerald and I had spent our retirement, where we'd hosted Christmas dinners and birthday celebrations, where every corner held a memory. The thought of leaving it felt like abandoning the last piece of him that remained tangible in my life. But Preston had been persistent, calling me every few days, always with a new reason why the move made sense. "Mom, you're getting older. What if something happens and you're all alone? What if you fall? What if you need help?" His concern seemed genuine, and after months of grieving in that townhouse where Gerald's absence echoed in every room, the thought of being closer to family, of seeing my grandchildren regularly, began to seem appealing. And his wife Cassandra had seemed supportive, even enthusiastic during those initial discussions. "Eleanor, we'd absolutely love to have you close by," she'd said with a bright smile when they came to visit me one Sunday afternoon. "It'll be wonderful having you around, especially for the children. Sophia and Benjamin ask about you constantly. They'd love to have their grandmother right there." Cassandra had been all charmed that day, showing me photos of the cottage on her phone, talking about how we could redecorate it together, making it sound like some exciting adventure we'd share. "It has its own entrance, its own kitchen, complete privacy," she'd assured me. "You'll have all your independence, but with family close by. It's the best of both worlds." So after 6 months of gentle pressure and persuasive arguments, I'd agreed. I sold my townhouse, the place where Gerald and I had planned to grow old together, and moved into the converted cottage behind Preston and Cassandra's sprawling colonial-style home in Willow Creek Estates. The cottage was beautiful, I had to admit. It had been built originally as a pool house but had been converted into a full guest residence by the previous owners. Large windows overlooked the manicured gardens, the small kitchen was modern and efficient, and the bedroom had a walk-in closet that Gerald would have loved for his collection of golf clothes. The first few months had been pleasant enough, almost idyllic. I'd help with the occasional dinner, babysit when Preston and Cassandra went out for date nights, tend to the flower beds that separated the main house from my cottage. My grandchildren, 8-year-old Sophia and 6-year-old Benjamin, would run over after school, bursting through my door with stories about their day, asking me to make my special chocolate chip cookies or help with homework. I felt useful, needed, loved. It seemed like the perfect arrangement. But gradually, so slowly that I didn't notice it happening until it was too far gone, things began to change. The shift was subtle at first, almost imperceptible. Cassandra's requests for help became more frequent, her tone less apologetic, the expectation more assumption than asking. "Eleanor, could you watch the kids today? My Pilates class ran late and then I have lunch with the girls. Eleanor, I need you to pick up my dry cleaning from Prestige Cleaners downtown. I'm absolutely swamped. Eleanor, the landscaping crew didn't show up again, can you handle the lawn? The mower is in the shed. Eleanor, I know it's last minute, but could you drive Benjamin to his piano lesson? I double-booked myself. I didn't mind helping, not really. Family helps family, that's what I'd always believed. That's how Gerald and I had raised Preston, with strong values about taking care of your own. But the requests became more frequent, the expectations higher, until it felt less like I was a beloved mother-in-law living nearby and more like unpaid staff who happened to occupy the cottage on the property. The breaking point would have been clear to anyone looking from the outside, but when you're living in it, when you're so desperate to maintain family harmony and connection, you make excuses. You rationalize. You convince yourself you're being too sensitive. Preston seemed completely oblivious to it all. He worked long hours at his position as regional director for Apex Medical Solutions, often traveling to conferences in different states, meeting with hospital administrators and procurement officers. When he was home, Cassandra transformed into the perfect wife and mother, all warmth and affection, helping him with his tie in the morning, asking about his day at dinner, laughing at his jokes. It was only when he was gone that I saw the other side of her. The impatient sighs when I asked questions. The dismissive waves of her hand when I offered opinions. The way she'd talk about me to her friends on the phone as if I couldn't hear through the thin walls of the cottage or the open windows when the weather was nice. Yes, she's living here now, I'd overheard her say one sunny afternoon in late September while I was deadheading the roses near my front window. She was sitting on the main house's back patio, wine glass in hand, phone pressed to her ear. It's convenient for babysitting, I suppose. Though honestly, Rebecca, she can be so old-fashioned about everything. You should have heard her opinion on the private school curriculum. Like anyone cares what she thinks about modern education. The comment had stung like a wasp, sharp and sudden. I'd stood there frozen with my gardening shears in hand, feeling my face flush with humiliation even though she couldn't see me. But I'd told myself I was being oversensitive. Cassandra was stressed, juggling 2 young children and her part-time work as an interior design consultant for luxury homes. She didn't mean to be unkind. It was just venting, the kind of thing everyone does with close friends. I'd convinced myself of that lie for months. There were other small moments that should have warned me, moments I'd pushed aside or explained away. Like when Cassandra had friends over for her book club and I'd walked over to the main house to return a casserole dish I'd borrowed. She'd seen me coming through the French doors and had actually rolled her eyes before plastering on a fake smile. Oh, Eleanor, we're in the middle of book club. Can this wait? I'd felt like a child being dismissed, standing there on her doorstep with the clean dish in my hands. Of course, I'm sorry to interrupt. Maybe next time just text first. She'd said it with a smile, but the message was clear, don't just show up. Or the time I'd offered to help Sophia with her science project, something about the solar system that I'd thought would be fun to work on together. Cassandra had intercepted me on my way to Sophia's room. Actually, Eleanor, I've got it handled. I don't want to confuse her with too many different teaching styles. The implication being that my teaching style was somehow inferior or problematic. These small rejections accumulated like snowfall, barely noticeable at first, but eventually burying me under their weight. The incident at Crestview National Bank showed me just how deep the disrespect had become, how completely Cassandra had come to view me as something less than human, less than worthy of basic dignity. It started on a seemingly ordinary Tuesday morning in early March. The spring weather was just beginning to show itself, with daffodils pushing up through the soil and the trees starting to bud. I needed to go to the bank to handle some paperwork related to Gerald's estate. There were still accounts being settled, life insurance proceeds that had finally been processed after months of bureaucratic delays, retirement accounts that needed beneficiary updates. The lawyer handling Gerald's estate had been calling me for weeks, leaving messages about documents that needed my signature, decisions that needed to be made. I'd been putting it off, honestly. Dealing with Gerald's financial affairs felt like acknowledging his death all over again, like finalizing something that made his absence permanent. But I couldn't avoid it any longer. The lawyer had been insistent in his last call, Mrs. Hartfield, these matters really need to be resolved. There are tax implications if we wait much longer. I'd mentioned to Preston over Sunday dinner that I needed to go to the bank. We'd been eating Cassandra's carefully prepared meal of grilled salmon and roasted vegetables, the children chattering about school, when I'd brought it up casually. I need to make a trip to Crestview National this week. The lawyer says there are some estate matters that need my attention in person. Preston had looked up from his plate, concern crossing his face. Is everything okay, Mom? Do you need me to come with you? Before I could answer, Cassandra had interjected smoothly. Actually, honey, you have that conference in Boston this week, remember? You're leaving Wednesday morning. She'd turned to me with what looked like a helpful smile. Eleanor, I could drive you. I need to go to the design district downtown anyway, pick up some fabric samples for the Morrison project. The bank is right on the way. That would be lovely, I'd said, grateful for the offer and the company. I'm not comfortable driving in the downtown traffic anymore. It's settled then, Cassandra had said, already pulling out her phone to check her calendar. How about Tuesday afternoon? Say, 2 p.m.? Preston had smiled, looking relieved that it was handled. Perfect. Thanks, Cass. Mom, you're in good hands. If only I'd known what those good hands actually meant. Tuesday arrived with clear skies and moderate temperatures. I dressed carefully that morning, wanting to look presentable for what felt like an important errand. I wore my navy blue pantsuit, the one Gerald had always said made me look distinguished, with my pearl earrings and the watch he'd given me for our 40th anniversary. I wanted to feel confident, put together, worthy of respect. Cassandra picked me up from the cottage at exactly 1:45 p.m., punctual as always when it suited her schedule. She was wearing designer jeans that probably cost more than my entire outfit, a silk blouse in cream, and oversized sunglasses that screamed expensive. Her dark hair was pulled back in a sleek ponytail, her makeup flawless. Ready? She'd asked, not getting out of her Range Rover, just honking lightly to signal she was there. I'd gathered my purse and the folder of documents the lawyer had sent me, locked my cottage door, and climbed into the passenger seat of her vehicle. The interior smelled like her expensive perfume and leather. The drive downtown took about 25 minutes. Cassandra spent the entire time on her phone, not talking but texting rapidly, her thumbs flying across the screen while she drove with one hand. I'd tried making conversation a few times, commenting on the weather, asking about her design project, mentioning how tall the children were getting. Her responses were monosyllabic. Yeah. Sure. By the time we pulled into the parking structure adjacent to Crestview National Bank, I felt like an invisible passenger in her car, just cargo being transported from one location to another. We walked across the street to the bank building, a modern structure of glass and steel that took up an entire corner block. Cassandra was still on her phone, her heels clicking against the sidewalk, barely slowing down for me to keep pace. The lobby of Crestview National was impressive, all marble floors and high ceilings, with modern artwork on the walls and comfortable seating areas. It was moderately busy for a Tuesday afternoon, with several customers waiting in line for the tellers and a few people sitting in the waiting area thumbing through their phones. I'll just be a few minutes, I told Cassandra as we walked through the glass doors that whooshed open automatically. I need to speak with someone about Gerald's accounts and some documents that need signing. Cassandra glanced up from her phone for the first time since we'd left home, irritation flickering across her perfectly made-up face. How long is a few minutes, Eleanor? I have an appointment at Sterling Design Center at 3:30. I can't be late. I'm not sure exactly, I admitted. It depends on how complicated the paperwork is. The lawyer said it might take a little while. She sighed dramatically, the kind of sigh that's designed to make someone feel guilty for existing. Fine. I'll wait. But please try to hurry this along. The word stung, but I nodded and approached the reception desk where a young woman with auburn hair and a name tag reading, Megan, greeted me with a professional smile that seemed genuine. Good afternoon. Welcome to Crestview National. How can I help you today? I need to speak with someone about estate accounts, I explained, trying to sound confident. My husband passed away, and there are some insurance proceeds that need to be deposited and some accounts that need to be updated with new beneficiary information. Megan's expression softened immediately, her smile becoming more sympathetic. I'm so sorry for your loss, ma'am. Let me get one of our private banking specialists for you. They'll be able to help you with everything. Can I have your name, please? Eleanor Hartfield. Perfect, Mrs. Hartfield. Please have a seat in our waiting area, and someone will be with you shortly. As I moved toward the seating area, Cassandra suddenly appeared at my elbow, her presence sharp and intrusive. She'd been standing several feet away scrolling through Instagram, but now she was inserting herself into my transaction like she had every right to be involved. "Excuse me," Cassandra said to Megan, her tone crisp and authoritative, the voice she probably used with contractors and vendors. "How long is this going to take? We're in a bit of a hurry." Megan looked between us, slightly confused about the relationship. "Are you both account holders?" "No," I started to say, but Cassandra cut me off smoothly. "I'm her daughter-in-law. I'm driving her today because she can't manage these things on her own anymore." The words were delivered with a practiced smile, but there was something condescending in her tone, something that made my cheeks flush with embarrassment. It was the way you'd talk about someone who was incompetent, someone who needed supervision. "I see," Megan said carefully, her professional demeanor still intact. "Well, estate matters can vary quite a bit in terms of time. It could be anywhere from 15 minutes to an hour, depending on the complexity of the accounts." Cassandra's jaw tightened visibly, a muscle jumping near her ear. "An hour? Eleanor, I specifically told you I have an important appointment at 3:30. Why didn't you schedule this for another day when you had more time? This is really inconsiderate." "I didn't know it would take so long," I said quietly, feeling myself physically shrinking under her irritation, my shoulders curving inward. "The lawyer just said I needed to come in." "Well, the lawyer should have been more specific," Cassandra snapped. Other customers in the lobby were starting to glance our way, drawn by her sharp tone. "I can't just sit here for an hour, Eleanor. Some of us have actual responsibilities." The implication was clear, unlike you, who apparently has nothing important to do. "Mrs. Hartfield?" A man's voice interrupted the tension, deep and calm. I turned to see a distinguished-looking man in his mid-50s approaching us from the offices in the back. He was tall, probably 6 feet, with silver hair impeccably groomed and warm brown eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. His navy suit was perfectly tailored, his tie a subtle pattern of burgundy and gold. His name tag identified him as Christopher Blackwell, branch manager. "I'm Christopher Blackwell, the manager here at Crestview National," he said, extending his hand to shake mine. His grip was firm but gentle, and his smile seemed genuinely welcoming. "Megan mentioned you needed help with some estate accounts. I'd be happy to assist you personally." "Yes, that's right," I said, feeling a wave of relief wash over me at his professional courtesy. Finally, someone who was treating me like a person rather than an inconvenience. But before I could say anything else, Cassandra immediately stepped forward, positioning herself slightly in front of me in a way that was both subtle and completely deliberate. She extended her own hand to Christopher. "Mr. Blackwell, I'm Cassandra Hartfield, Eleanor's daughter-in-law. I'm accompanying her today because, well, these financial matters can be quite overwhelming for someone her age." She said it with concern in her voice, as if she were the devoted family member looking after a fragile elderly relative. "We're actually in quite a rush, so if there's any way to expedite this process, we'd really appreciate it. I have a crucial business appointment across town." Christopher's smile remained perfectly professional, but I noticed his eyes flicker with something, perhaps surprise or assessment. He looked at Cassandra, then back at me, and I saw him register the dynamic playing out before him. "I understand time is valuable for everyone," he said diplomatically. "Why don't we step into my office and see what we can do to help Mrs. Hartfield efficiently?" He gestured toward a glass-walled office near the back of the bank, spacious and private. I started to follow, grateful to escape the lobby where other customers were still watching us with varying degrees of interest and disapproval. But as I took my first step, Cassandra's manicured hand closed around my upper arm, stopping me. Her grip was firm enough to be controlling without being overtly aggressive. "Actually, Mr. Blackwell," Cassandra said, her voice dropping lower but still perfectly audible to anyone nearby, "before we waste everyone's time, I need to ask, is this something that really needs to be done today? These estate things can usually wait, can't they? I mean, her husband has been gone for over a year now. What's another few weeks?" The casual dismissal of Gerald's memory, the reduction of our life together and his death to estate things that could wait, hit me like a physical blow. I felt tears prick at my eyes but forced them back. Victoria, I've already made the trip, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. The lawyer said it's important that I handle this soon. There are tax implications if I wait longer. But it's not urgent, is it? Cassandra pressed, and now I could see the calculation in her eyes, the way she was trying to determine if this was worth her time and effort. I mean, how much money are we actually talking about here? Is this about a few $1,000s or something significant? Before I could answer, before I could even process the audacity of her asking about money that was none of her business, Christopher Blackwell spoke up. His tone remained courteous, but there was a slight edge of steel underneath that hadn't been there before. Mrs. Hartfield, he said, addressing me directly and noticeably not acknowledging Cassandra's question, would you like to proceed with your banking today? I assure you, I'll make this as efficient as possible while ensuring all your needs are properly addressed. Something in his tone, in the way he looked at me with genuine respect, gave me strength. Yes, please, I said, finding my voice and making it firmer. I'd like to proceed with everything the lawyer sent me here to do. Cassandra's expression tightened, her lips pressing into a thin line that made small wrinkles appear around her mouth despite all the Botox. But she followed as we walked toward Christopher's office, her heels clicking against the marble floor like small gunshots. Once inside, Christopher gestured for me to sit in one of the plush leather chairs facing his large desk. The office was decorated with tasteful artwork and family photos, creating an atmosphere of professional success combined with personal warmth. Cassandra remained standing by the door, arms crossed over her chest, radiating impatience like heat from asphalt. She'd taken her sunglasses off and was holding them in one hand, using them to gesticulate as she shifted her weight from foot to foot. Now then, Christopher said, settling into his executive chair and waking up his computer with a movement of his mouse. You mentioned estate accounts and insurance proceeds. Let me pull up your information. Eleanor Hartfield, correct? Yes, that's right. His fingers moved across the keyboard, then paused. His eyebrows rose slightly, and he looked at me with what seemed like newfound interest, though his professional demeanor never wavered. Mrs. Hartfield, I see several accounts here under your name and your late husband's estate trust. Before we proceed, I need to verify some information for security purposes. Standard protocol. Can you confirm your husband's full name and date of birth? I provided the information, my voice steady despite Cassandra's heavy sighs from her position by the door. Christopher nodded, making notes on his screen, occasionally clicking through what appeared to be multiple account windows. And your maiden name, Mrs. Hartfield? Ashworth. Eleanor Ashworth. Perfect. And the last 4 digits of your social security number? I provided those as well, grateful for his thoroughness even as I felt Cassandra's impatience growing like a storm cloud behind me. All right, Christopher said, turning his full attention to me, his expression both professional and slightly concerned. I see you have life insurance proceeds that have been deposited into a holding account pending your instructions, and there are several other accounts that need beneficiary updates and authorization signatures. The total assets we're discussing today are quite substantial, Mrs. Hartfield. I want to make sure we handle everything correctly and according to your wishes. How substantial are we talking? Cassandra's voice cut through the room like a blade through silk. She'd suddenly abandoned her bored stance and was now focused intently on the conversation, her earlier impatience replaced by sharp interest. Christopher's expression remained neutral, but I saw something flicker in his eyes that looked like professional wariness, the kind of look a bank manager probably develops after years of dealing with family financial disputes. I'm discussing account details with Mrs. Hartfield, he said calmly but firmly. Are you an authorized party on any of these accounts? I'm her daughter-in-law, Cassandra repeated, as if those 3 words somehow granted her automatic access to my private financial information. And my husband, her son Preston, handles all of her financial affairs. We're the ones who take care of her, who provide for her. She lives on our property. The phrase hung in the air like an accusation, we take care of her. As if I were a charity case, a burden they'd graciously shouldered. Christopher's gaze shifted back to me, and in his eyes, I saw something that looked like understanding, perhaps even concern. Mrs. Hartfield, Do you have anyone currently authorized to discuss your accounts or make financial decisions on your behalf? A power of attorney or cosigner? No, I said quietly but clearly. These are my personal accounts. I handle my own financial affairs. It was the truth, even if Cassandra was trying to paint a different picture. Cassandra made a sound of frustration, a sharp exhale that communicated her opinion perfectly. Eleanor, don't be difficult. You know Preston and I help you with everything. Your bills, your appointments, everything. We should absolutely be discussing this together, as a family. These are private financial matters, ma'am, Christopher said, his voice remaining polite but with unmistakable firmness. If Mrs. Hartfield wishes to keep them private, that is entirely her legal right as the account holder. Cassandra's face flushed with anger, color rising from her neck to her cheeks. She stepped closer to Christopher's desk, and I could see her struggling to maintain her composure, her veneer of sophisticated control beginning to crack. I don't think you understand the situation here, Mr. Blackwell, she said, her voice taking on an edge I'd never heard before, sharp and almost threatening. Eleanor lives on our property. We provide her housing, we drive her places, we include her in our family activities, we take care of her daily needs. She's not exactly independent. She's not exactly capable of making complex financial decisions on her own. The humiliation washed over me in waves, each word adding another layer of shame. Here I was, being characterized as some kind of dependent burden, an incompetent elderly woman who needed management, in front of a bank manager, a complete stranger. In a public place where other people could overhear through the glass walls. Cassandra, please, I said, my voice shaking with a combination of embarrassment and rising anger. This isn't appropriate. But she wasn't done. She wasn't nearly done. She turned back to Christopher, her expression a mixture of frustration and what I could only describe as barely contained contempt. Look, I don't know what kind of substantial amounts we're talking about here, but Eleanor doesn't really handle money well. That's just a fact. She's from a different generation, she doesn't understand modern banking, investments, any of that. That's why Preston and I oversee things for her, to protect her from making mistakes. So whatever decisions need to be made, whatever documents need to be signed, my husband and I should be involved in those discussions. Christopher's expression had gone completely cold, all traces of professional warmth disappearing. He straightened in his chair, and suddenly his considerable height and authoritative presence became much more apparent. Mrs. Hartfield, he said, addressing me directly and pointedly ignoring Cassandra, would you like to proceed with this discussion privately, or would you prefer to come back another time when you can meet with me alone, without other parties present? It was that question, delivered with such professional courtesy and respect, that made something fundamental shift inside me. Here was a complete stranger, a bank manager who had known me for all of 5 minutes, treating me with more dignity and respect than my own daughter-in-law had shown me in months. More dignity than my own family had shown me. I'd like to proceed now, I said, and I was surprised by how strong my voice sounded, how clear. Privately, please. Cassandra's mouth actually dropped open, her perfectly applied lipstick suddenly seeming garish against her shocked expression. Excuse me? Eleanor, I drove you here. I took time out of my extremely busy day to bring you to this bank. And I appreciate that, I said, turning in my chair to look at her directly, really look at her for perhaps the first time in years. But these are my personal accounts, my private financial matters, and I'll handle them myself. As I've always done. This is absolutely ridiculous, Cassandra snapped, abandoning all pretense of the concerned daughter-in-law. You can barely manage your own household, let alone complex financial matters. This is a complete waste of everyone's time. And then came the words that would change everything. The words that would shatter whatever remained of my relationship with my son's wife. The words that would force me to finally see the truth I'd been avoiding for 3 long years. Cassandra leaned forward toward Christopher's desk, her voice dropping to what she clearly thought was a confidential tone, though every word rang out crystal clear in the quiet office. She gestured dismissively in my direction with one manicured hand, as if I were a piece of furniture she was describing. Listen, Mr. Blackwell, she said, her tone conspiratorial, woman to professional. Let me be frank with you. She's nobody. Just an old woman living in our guest house who gets confused about these things, who doesn't really understand how the modern world works. Whatever forms need to be signed, whatever decisions need to be made, send them to my husband, Preston Hartfield. He's her son and he has medical power of attorney, so he's really the one who should be handling all of this anyway. We're just trying to protect her from herself. The room went completely, utterly silent. I sat frozen in my chair, the words echoing in my head like a bell that wouldn't stop ringing. She's nobody. Just an old woman. Confused. Doesn't understand. We're protecting her from herself. My own daughter-in-law, the woman married to my only son, the mother of my beloved grandchildren, had just referred to me as nobody. Not just dismissed my opinions or my capabilities, but reduced my entire existence to nothing. Nobody. As if I hadn't lived 70 years, raised a family, built a life, loved and lost, survived and endured. As if all of that meant nothing, made me nothing. I felt something fundamental crack open inside my chest, like ice breaking on a frozen river. Christopher Blackwell's face transformed completely in the seconds following Cassandra's devastating statement. The professional courtesy melted away, replaced by something harder, colder, and unmistakably protective. He stood up slowly from his desk, his considerable height suddenly seeming imposing rather than merely distinguished. When he spoke, his voice had lost all warmth. "Ma'am," he said to Cassandra, his words precise and deliberate, each one landing like a stone dropping into still water, "I'm going to need you to step outside my office immediately." Cassandra blinked, clearly not expecting this response. Her mouth opened slightly in surprise, then snapped shut. "What? Why?" "I'm just trying to help facilitate. You've just made several deeply concerning statements about Mrs. Hartfield's capacity and authority over her own accounts," Christopher interrupted, his tone now carrying the weight of professional authority and barely contained anger. "Statements that, I should mention, are not only profoundly disrespectful but potentially constitute financial elder abuse if you're attempting to control or access her finances without proper legal authorization and her explicit consent." The words hung in the air like an accusation. Financial elder abuse. The phrase seemed to echo off the glass walls of the office. Cassandra's face went white, then flushed deep red, the color spreading down her neck and disappearing beneath the collar of her expensive silk blouse. That's not what I'm doing at all. That's absolutely ridiculous. I'm her family. I'm trying to help her because she cannot what? Christopher's voice cut through her protest like a knife. Cannot manage her own affairs? Cannot make her own decisions? Based on what medical or legal documentation? Do you have guardianship papers? A court order declaring her incompetent? Legal power of attorney that she's signed willingly? Cassandra's mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for air. "Well, no, but Preston has medical power of attorney, and medical power of attorney," Christopher said, his voice sharp with professional precision, "only grants authority over healthcare decisions and only becomes active if the person is medically incapacitated. It has absolutely no bearing on financial matters unless specifically combined with financial power of attorney, and even then, it requires the person to be declared incompetent by medical professionals. Mrs. Hartfield appears to be perfectly competent and capable of making her own decisions." I sat in my chair, watching this unfold as if from a great distance, still reeling from Cassandra's casual dismissal of my entire existence. "She's nobody." The words kept replaying in my mind, each repetition cutting deeper. "Mrs. Hartfield," Christopher said, turning his attention back to me, his expression softening considerably when he looked at me, "do you wish for this person to be involved in your financial matters in any capacity?" The question hung in the air. I looked at Cassandra, really looked at her, perhaps for the first time with clear eyes unclouded by the desperate need to maintain family peace. I saw her expensive clothes purchased with money she and Preston earned but supplemented by the free housing I provided by living in their cottage, making them look generous to their friends. I saw her perfectly manicured nails that had never scrubbed a floor or changed a diaper without complaining about it afterward. I saw the calculation in her eyes, the way she was already trying to figure out how to spin this situation to her advantage. And I saw something else, something that had been there all along but that I'd refused to acknowledge. She didn't care about me as a person, as Eleanor, as someone with feelings and dignity and worth. She cared about what I could provide. Free babysitting. Free housekeeping. Free yard work. And apparently, she'd been hoping for access to whatever money I might have. No, I said, and my voice came out stronger than I expected, clearer. I do not want her involved in my financial matters. These are my private accounts, and I will handle them alone. Cassandra's expression twisted into something ugly, all pretense of concern or family devotion evaporating like morning dew under harsh sunlight. You're making a huge mistake, Eleanor. A huge mistake. Preston is going to hear about this. He's going to hear about how you're being secretive and difficult, how you're refusing family help, how you're letting some bank manager manipulate you. Ma'am, Christopher said, his voice dropping to a dangerous quiet, I'm going to ask you one final time to leave my office. If you don't comply immediately, I will have to call security to escort you from the premises. For a long moment, I genuinely thought Cassandra might refuse. Her hands had clenched into fists at her sides, her designer handbag dangling from one wrist. Her breathing was rapid and shallow, her chest rising and falling quickly beneath her silk blouse. The carefully constructed mask of the sophisticated, successful woman had cracked completely, revealing something petty and mean underneath. But then, with a final withering glare that she divided equally between Christopher and me, she spun on her expensive heels and stalked toward the door. She yanked it open with enough force that it bounced slightly against its frame, then turned back for one final parting shot. You're going to regret this, Eleanor, she hissed, her voice low but venomous. You have no idea what you've just done. Preston is going to be furious. Absolutely furious. Don't expect any help from us anymore. Don't expect to see your grandchildren. You've made your choice. Then she was gone, the door slamming behind her with a sharp crack that made me flinch. Through the glass walls of Christopher's office, I watched her stride across the bank lobby, her phone already pressed to her ear before she'd even reached the main doors. I knew exactly who she was calling. Preston would be getting her version of events within minutes, a version where she was the concerned daughter-in-law trying to help her confused, difficult mother-in-law, and I was the unreasonable old woman causing problems. In the sudden silence that followed Cassandra's dramatic exit, I realized I was trembling. My hands were shaking in my lap, and I clasped them together tightly to try to stop the tremors. Christopher must have noticed because he immediately called out through his open door. Megan? Could you please bring some water in here? Within moments, the receptionist appeared with a bottle of cold water and a sympathetic smile. Here you go, Mrs. Hartfield. Take your time. I accepted the water gratefully, unscrewing the cap with shaking fingers and taking several long sips. The cold liquid helped ground me, gave me something to focus on besides the chaos of emotions swirling through my chest. Humiliation, anger, grief, fear, and something else I hadn't felt in years, a strange, unfamiliar spark that might have been the beginning of resolve. Christopher settled back into his chair, giving me time to compose myself. He pulled a tissue box from a drawer and placed it on the desk within easy reach, a small gesture of kindness that somehow made tears spring to my eyes. Mrs. Hartfield, he said gently, once Megan had left and closed the door behind her, giving us privacy once again, I'm deeply sorry you had to experience that. What just happened was completely inappropriate on multiple levels, and I want you to know that your financial information is private and protected by federal law. No one, not family members, not anyone, can access or discuss your accounts without your explicit written authorization. I nodded, still not trusting my voice, focusing on breathing slowly and evenly. I also want you to know, Christopher continued, his voice taking on a more serious tone, that what your daughter-in-law said raised several red flags from a banking perspective. The attempt to characterize you as incompetent, the suggestion that someone else should be making your financial decisions, the dismissive language, these are all warning signs that we're trained to watch for in cases of potential financial exploitation of elderly clients. She called me nobody, I whispered, the words finally breaking free. My own daughter-in-law called me nobody. I heard, Christopher said, and there was genuine anger in his voice, not directed at me but at what had just transpired. And I want you to understand that you are most definitely not nobody. You're a valued client of this bank, Mrs. Hartfield. More importantly, you're a person who deserves respect and dignity, regardless of your age or your living situation or anything else. No one has the right to speak about you or to you in that manner. His words broke something open inside me, and I felt tears start to roll down my cheeks. I grabbed a tissue from the box and pressed it to my eyes, trying to maintain some shred of dignity, but the emotions were too strong, too overwhelming. Here was a complete stranger, a bank manager who had known me for less than 15 minutes, showing me more kindness and respect than I'd received from my own family in months, possibly years. "I'm sorry," I managed to say through my tears. "I'm so sorry for causing a scene, Mrs. Hartfield." "Stop," Christopher said firmly but kindly. "You have absolutely nothing to apologize for. Nothing. You came to this bank to conduct your legitimate business, and you were subjected to disrespectful treatment by someone who accompanied you. That's not your fault. The only person who should be apologizing is the person who just left." I wiped my eyes, taking several deep breaths, trying to pull myself together. Through the glass walls of the office, I could see other bank employees and customers occasionally glancing our way, no doubt curious about the drama that had just unfolded. The humiliation of it made my cheeks burn. "Now," Christopher said, his tone becoming more businesslike but still warm, "let's talk about why you're really here today, and let's make sure your affairs are handled exactly the way you want them to be handled. No one else. Just you and your decisions. Does that sound acceptable?" "Yes," I said, my voice steadier now. "Yes, please." Christopher turned his computer monitor slightly so I could see the screen as well. "Let me walk you through what I'm seeing in your accounts. Your late husband was Gerald Hartfield, correct?" "Yes. He passed away 14 months ago. Heart attack. It was very sudden." "I'm truly sorry for your loss," Christopher said with genuine sympathy. "It's clear from these accounts that he planned very carefully to make sure you were provided for. These are substantial assets, Mrs. Hartfield." He clicked through several screens, and I watched numbers scroll past, account balances and investment portfolios that made my head spin. Gerald had always handled our finances. I'd trusted him completely, never really involving myself in the details beyond our household budget. After he died, I'd been so overwhelmed with grief and the practical matters of funeral arrangements and estate probate that I'd let the lawyer handle everything, signing papers when told to sign, trusting that it was all being taken care of properly. "As you can see here," Christopher said, pointing to the screen, "your late husband had several life insurance policies. The proceeds have been deposited into this holding account pending your instructions on how you'd like them invested or distributed. That total is $850,000. I stared at the number on the screen, not quite believing it. $850,000. I'd known Gerald had life insurance, but I'd never imagined it was that much. "Then there are his retirement accounts," Christopher continued, clicking to another screen. "His 401k and IRA have been transferred to inherited accounts in your name. The combined total of those is approximately $725,000. Another staggering number. I felt dizzy looking at it. He also had several investment accounts, stocks, bonds, mutual funds. Those have a current value of approximately $180,000, though of course that fluctuates with the market." Christopher clicked through several more screens, showing me account after account, each one representing a piece of Gerald's careful planning, his desire to make sure I would be secure after he was gone. My vision blurred again with tears, but this time they were tears of love and loss, missing the man who had thought so carefully about my future even as he couldn't have known his own would be cut short. "And finally," Christopher said, pulling up one more screen, "there's the savings account that you and your husband held jointly. That has a current balance of $94,000. He turned to look at me directly, his expression serious and intent. "Mrs. Hartfield, your total liquid assets, not counting any real estate or physical property, amount to approximately $1.85 million. The number hit me like a physical blow. I gripped the arms of my chair, feeling the room tilt slightly. $1.85 million. Nearly $2 million. I had no idea, I stammered. I knew there was insurance money coming, and I knew Gerald had retirement accounts, but the lawyer never said the total was so much. The lawyer may have been waiting for all the accounts to be fully processed before giving you a complete picture, Christopher said. Estate matters can take time, especially when there are multiple insurance policies and retirement accounts to handle. But everything has now been settled and deposited into your accounts here at Crestview National. The question now is, what do you want to do with these assets? I sat there in stunned silence, my mind racing. I'd spent the past 14 months living like a poor relative in my son's guest cottage, accepting their generosity, letting Cassandra treat me like unpaid help, all while nearly $2 million sat in bank accounts with my name on them. Money that Gerald had worked his entire career to save and invest, money that he'd carefully ensured would take care of me after he was gone. And I'd been living like a charity case, grateful for the roof over my head, afraid to upset anyone, accepting disrespect and dismissal because I thought I had nowhere else to go. Mrs. Hartfield? Christopher's voice brought me back to the present. Are you all right? I know this is a lot to process. Does my family know about this? I asked suddenly, the question bursting out of me. Do they know how much money there is? Christopher shook his head. Not from this bank, they don't. We would never disclose account information to anyone without your authorization. Have you discussed your finances with your son or daughter-in-law? I thought back to the conversations after Gerald's death. Preston had asked about life insurance, and I'd told him there was some, but I hadn't known the amounts myself at that point. He'd offered to help me manage things, to look over statements and help make decisions, but I'd told him the lawyer was handling everything. Had I mentioned specific amounts? I didn't think so. The lawyer had sent me papers to sign, and I'd signed them and sent them back, but I'd never really looked at the final totals. I'd been too wrapped up in grief, too overwhelmed by the process of simply continuing to exist without Gerald. I don't think so, I said slowly. They know there was insurance money, but I never told them how much because I didn't know myself. Not the full total. Christopher nodded thoughtfully. Mrs. Hartfield, I don't want to overstep, but given what just happened with your daughter-in-law, I think it's important that you consider some protective measures for your accounts. There are ways to ensure that only you can access or move these funds, ways to protect yourself from potential financial exploitation. You think? I trailed off, not wanting to say it out loud, not wanting to believe it. I think your daughter-in-law was very interested in finding out how much money you have, Christopher said carefully. Her questions about the amounts, her insistence that she should be involved in your financial decisions, her attempt to characterize you as incompetent, these are all tactics that, unfortunately, we sometimes see in cases where family members are trying to gain access to an elderly person's assets. The words made me feel sick. But Preston, my son wouldn't. I'm not making any accusations about your son, Christopher said gently. I don't know him, and I don't know your family dynamics. But I do know that you deserve to have complete control over your own money, and you deserve to make decisions about it without pressure or manipulation from anyone else. I sat there, trying to process everything that had happened in the past 30 minutes. The humiliation at the bank counter, Cassandra's dismissive comments, her calling me nobody, the shocking revelation about how much money I actually had, and now this suggestion that my own family might be trying to exploit me financially. It was too much. It was all too much. What kind of protective measures? I asked finally, my voice small. Several options, Christopher said, shifting into professional advisor mode. First, we can set up additional security on your accounts, passwords, security questions, flags that would alert us to any unusual activity. Second, we can clearly document that you are the sole authorized person on these accounts, which would prevent anyone from trying to add themselves or make changes without you being physically present with proper identification. He paused, looking at me carefully. Third, and I want you to think about this seriously, we can set up what's called a revocable trust. It would give you complete control over your assets during your lifetime, but it would also create a legal structure that makes it much more difficult for anyone to challenge your decisions or try to claim you're incompetent. A trust, I repeated, the word feeling foreign in my mouth. It's not as complicated as it sounds, Christopher assured me. Essentially, you transfer your assets into the trust, and you serve as the trustee, which means you have complete control. You can access the money anytime, make any investments or withdrawals you want, change the terms, everything. But it creates a legal entity that's harder to challenge than individual accounts. And if something did happen to me? If I did become incompetent or worse? That's where you would name successor trustees in the trust documents. People you actually trust to handle your affairs according to your wishes. And you would specify exactly how you want your assets distributed. It takes the decision-making out of the hands of probate courts and potential family disputes. I thought about this, my mind slowly clearing from the fog of shock and emotion. How long would it take to set something like this up? With the right attorney, we could have the basic structure in place within a week or two. I can recommend several estate planning attorneys who specialize in this type of work. They're professionals who would work directly with you to understand your wishes and create documents that protect your interests. Through the glass walls, I could see the bank had gotten busier, more customers coming in for their afternoon banking. Normal people doing normal things, unaware of the small earthquake that had just occurred in my life. Mrs. Hartfield, Christopher said, drawing my attention back to him, I know this is overwhelming. You came in here expecting to sign a few papers, and instead you've dealt with a family confrontation and discovered you have significantly more assets than you realized. You don't have to make any decisions right this second. But I do have to make some decisions, I said, hearing the strength starting to return to my voice. Because in about. I checked my watch, 20 minutes or so, my son is going to call me. His wife is probably talking to him right now, telling him her version of what happened here. And I need to figure out what I'm going to say to him. Christopher nodded. That's true. And I think it's important that you're honest with him, but I also think you should be strategic. You don't owe anyone a detailed accounting of your finances. These are your private matters. He's my son, I said, feeling tears threaten again. He's my only child. Preston and I have always been close, or at least I thought we were. How do I tell him that his wife called me nobody? How do I explain that I don't trust them with my financial information anymore? You tell him the truth, Christopher said simply. You tell him that you're a competent adult who is managing her own affairs, and that you were disrespected by his wife in a way that's unacceptable. You tell him that you need some time and space to figure things out on your own. He pulled a business card from his desk drawer and wrote something on the back of it. Here's my direct line and my cell phone. If you need anything, if you have questions, if anything happens that makes you uncomfortable, call me. Anytime. That's what I'm here for. I took the card, holding it like a lifeline. Thank you, Mr. Blackwell. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't been here today. Please, call me Christopher, he said with a warm smile. And Mrs. Hartfield, I want you to remember something. You walked in here today as a client seeking help with estate matters. You're walking out as a woman with nearly $2 million in assets, which makes you one of our private banking clients. That means you have access to a whole range of services, financial advisors, estate planners, investment specialists. You're not just someone's confused elderly mother-in-law. You're a woman of substantial means, and you deserve to be treated accordingly. The words settled over me like a warm blanket. A woman of substantial means. Not nobody. Not a burden. Not someone who needed to be managed or controlled or dismissed. Now, Christopher said, let's handle the immediate business. I'm going to set up those additional security measures on your accounts right now. I'm also going to flag your file so that any attempt to add authorized users or make changes would require you to come in personally with 2 forms of identification. Is that acceptable? Yes, I said firmly. Yes, that's exactly what I want. For the next 20 minutes, Christopher walked me through various security setups, helping me create passwords and security questions, explaining how the alerts would work if there was any unusual activity on my accounts. He printed out statements for all my accounts so I could see everything clearly on paper. One more thing, he said as we were finishing up. Your current address on file is listed as 847 Maple Ridge Lane, which I believe is your son's property. I nodded. That's the main house address. I live in the cottage behind it. Would you like to open a post office box and have all your bank statements and correspondence sent there instead? That would ensure your financial information remains completely private. The suggestion made perfect sense, and I immediately agreed. Christopher made a note to set that up, and gave me information about the nearest post office location where I could rent a box. By the time we finished, it was nearly 4 p.m. I'd been in the bank for almost 2 hours, though it felt like days had passed. I felt exhausted, emotionally wrung out, but also strangely energized, as if something fundamental had shifted inside me. As Christopher walked me to the lobby, I realized I had no idea how I was getting home. Cassandra had driven me here, and she'd obviously left without me. I'd have to call a taxi or a rideshare, something I'd never done before. Mrs. Hartfield, Christopher said as we reached the main doors, do you have a way home? I'll call a taxi, I said, trying to sound confident about something I'd never actually done. Tell you what, he said, pulling out his phone. Let me call a car service we use for our private banking clients. It's complimentary, and they'll make sure you get home safely. Within 10 minutes, a black sedan pulled up to the curb, and a professional driver in a suit got out to open the door for me. It felt surreal, being treated like someone important, someone worthy of this kind of service. As I settled into the back seat, my phone buzzed in my purse. I pulled it out and saw exactly what I'd expected, 7 missed calls from Preston, and a series of text messages that started concerned and became increasingly frantic. Mom, Cassandra said there was an issue at the bank. Are you okay? Mom, please call me. Cass said you were acting strange. Mom, I'm worried. What happened? Why won't you answer? Mom, this isn't like you. Cass said you refused to let her help you. What's going on? Mom, please call me. I stared at the messages, my finger hovering over the screen. The driver was pulling away from the bank, heading toward Willow Creek Estates. I had maybe 25 minutes before I'd be home, before I'd have to face whatever was waiting for me there. I needed to call Preston. I needed to talk to my son, to explain what had happened, to somehow navigate this disaster that had exploded in the middle of what should have been a simple banking errand. But Cassandra's words kept echoing in my head, she's nobody. And suddenly I knew, with crystal clarity, that I couldn't just smooth this over. I couldn't pretend it hadn't happened. I couldn't sacrifice my dignity and self-respect to keep the peace, not anymore. Because I wasn't nobody. I was Eleanor Hartfield, and I deserved better than this. I typed out a brief text to Preston, I'm fine. On my way home. We need to talk, but not right now. I need some time to think. I hit send before I could second-guess myself, then turned off my phone and put it back in my purse. The driver glanced at me in the rearview mirror. Everything all right, ma'am? Yes, I said, and surprised myself by meaning it. Yes, I think everything is going to be all right. As the car carried me back toward Willow Creek Estates, back toward whatever confrontation awaited me there, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt like myself again. Not Preston's mother, not Cassandra's unpaid help, not the confused old woman living in the guest cottage. Just Eleanor. Just me. And that, I was beginning to realize, was going to have to be enough. The car ride gave me time to think, time to process everything that had happened. I watched the city streets give way to suburban neighborhoods, then to the tree-lined avenues of Willow Creek Estates with its massive homes and pristine landscaping. This world of wealth and privilege that Cassandra valued so much, that she'd been so determined to maintain and expand. Had she known about my money? Had she suspected? Was that why she'd been so insistent on being involved in my banking today? Or had it been a fishing expedition, a way to determine whether I was worth continuing to manipulate and control? The questions circled in my mind, but no clear answers emerged. What I did know, with increasing certainty, was that things could never go back to the way they'd been. The words couldn't be unspoken. The disrespect couldn't be overlooked. The truth about how my daughter-in-law really viewed me couldn't be ignored. As the car turned onto Maple Ridge Lane, I saw Preston's Mercedes already parked in the driveway of the main house. He was home early, no doubt summoned back by Cassandra's frantic phone call. The confrontation I'd been dreading was going to happen immediately, no time to prepare, no time to gather my thoughts. The driver pulled up beside the cottage, and I thanked him quietly as he opened my door. "Have a good evening, Mrs. Hartfield," he said with a respectful nod. I walked slowly toward my cottage door, keys in hand, but before I could reach it, I heard the back door of the main house slam open. "Mom!" Preston's voice called out, urgent and worried. "Mom, wait." I turned to see my son striding across the lawn toward me, his tie loosened, his suit jacket discarded somewhere inside. His face was creased with concern and confusion, and my heart ached at the sight of him. This was still my boy, the child I'd raised, the man I loved more than anything. But he was also Cassandra's husband. And somehow, I was going to have to navigate that impossible situation. "Preston," I said quietly, standing my ground at my cottage door. "I'm very tired. Can we talk tomorrow?" "No, Mom, we need to talk now," he said, reaching me and immediately taking my hands in his. "Cassandra told me what happened at the bank. She's really upset. She said you were acting completely unlike yourself, that you refused to let her help you, that the bank manager was rude to her." "Stop," I said, pulling my hands away from his. "Preston, stop. That's not what happened." He looked startled by my tone, by the firmness in my voice. "Then tell me what did happen, because Cass is inside practically in tears saying she was just trying to help you and you humiliated her in front of the entire bank. Is that really what she told you?" I asked, feeling anger start to build in my chest. "That I humiliated her? She said you insisted on handling private financial matters alone, that you wouldn't let her be involved even though she drove you there, that the manager was incredibly disrespectful to her and basically kicked her out of his office." "Mom, what's going on? This isn't like you at all." I looked at my son, this man who I'd raised to be kind and fair, and made a decision. If there was going to be honesty, it had to start now. "Your wife," I said slowly and clearly, "called me nobody today, Preston. She told the bank manager that I was just an old woman living in your guest house who gets confused about things. She tried to take over my private financial business, tried to characterize me as incompetent, and when I refused to allow it, she called me nobody." Preston's face went pale. "She wouldn't. Mom, she wouldn't say that." "She did say that," I replied, my voice steady despite the pain in my chest. "And the bank manager heard it too. That's why he asked her to leave his office, because she was attempting to interfere with my legal right to handle my own financial affairs." "Mom, I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding." "There's been no misunderstanding, Preston," I interrupted. I heard every word clearly. So did the bank manager. So did anyone else in that lobby who happened to be paying attention. Your wife dismissed my existence, my autonomy, and my competence because she wanted to know about my financial business. That's what happened. I could see the conflict on Preston's face, the struggle between believing his wife and believing his mother. The doubt that flickered in his eyes cut me deeper than anything Cassandra had said. "Why don't we all sit down together?" Preston suggested, his voice taking on that reasonable, "let's all become adults" tone that I recognized from his business negotiations. "Let's talk this through. I'm sure if we just communicate clearly." "No," I said firmly. "I'm not sitting down with your wife right now. I'm not going to subject myself to more disrespect while she pretends she did nothing wrong. I need time, Preston. I need space. I need to think about what happens next." "What happens next?" Preston's voice rose slightly, tinged with panic. "Mom, what does that mean? What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the fact that I've been living here for 3 years, and for the past year at least, possibly longer, your wife has been treating me like hired help instead of family. I'm talking about the fact that she sees me as someone to use, not someone to value. And I'm talking about the fact that today she made that crystal clear to a complete stranger. Mom, if Cassandra has been asking too much of you, if she's been taking advantage of your willingness to help with the kids, we can talk about boundaries, we can set some new rules. This isn't about babysitting schedules, Preston." The words came out louder than I intended, sharp with frustration. "This is about basic human respect. This is about being treated like I matter, like I'm a person with my own life and my own dignity. A movement caught my eye, and I looked past Preston to see Cassandra standing on the back patio of the main house, her arms crossed, watching us. Even from this distance, I could see the calculation in her posture, the way she was assessing the situation, probably planning her next move. I'm going inside now, I said to Preston, turning toward my cottage door. I need to be alone. I need to think. We can talk tomorrow, or the next day, but not now. Mom, please, Preston said, and the pleading in his voice broke my heart. Please don't do this. Don't shut me out. Let's fix this. I paused with my key in the lock and looked back at my son, this man who I loved so much, who I'd sacrificed so much for, who somehow had no idea what his wife had been doing to me for months. Some things can't be fixed with a conversation, Preston, I said softly. Some things require real change. And I'm not sure your wife is capable of that kind of change. Then I went inside my cottage and closed the door, leaving my son standing on the lawn in the fading afternoon light, caught between his mother and his wife, probably for the first time truly understanding that he couldn't have both of us without something fundamental changing. I locked the door behind me and leaned against it, my legs suddenly weak. Through the window, I could see Preston still standing there, running his hands through his hair in frustration before finally walking slowly back toward the main house and his waiting wife. I knew this was just the beginning. I knew the real confrontation was still coming, that Cassandra wouldn't let this go, that Preston would be caught in the middle trying to make peace between two women who wanted very different things. But for the first time in 3 years, I'd stood up for myself. I'd drawn a line. I'd refused to accept being treated as nobody. And whatever happened next, that felt like something worth fighting for. That night was one of the longest of my life. I sat in my cottage with all the curtains drawn, listening to the sounds of argument drifting across the lawn from the main house. Voices raised, then lowered, then raised again. Preston and Cassandra, fighting about me, about what had happened, about what it all meant. I didn't eat dinner. I couldn't. My stomach was twisted in knots, and every time I thought about what had happened at the bank, about Cassandra's words, about the look on Preston's face when he couldn't immediately defend me, I felt nauseated. Around 9 p.m., my phone buzzed with a text from Preston, Mom, please. Let's talk. I love you. We can fix this. I stared at the message for a long time before typing back, I love you too. But some things can't be fixed with just words. Good night. I turned off my phone after that, unable to handle any more messages, any more pleading, any more attempts to minimize what had happened or rush me into forgiveness I didn't feel. Sleep, when it finally came around 2 a.m., was fitful and filled with anxious dreams. I woke up Wednesday morning feeling exhausted, my eyes gritty and swollen from crying, my body aching as if I'd physically fought a battle instead of just an emotional one. I made coffee and sat at my small kitchen table, staring out at the garden that separated my cottage from the main house. The spring flowers were blooming beautifully, tulips and daffodils and hyacinths that I'd planted last fall. I'd spent hours on my knees in the dirt, creating beauty for a place I'd thought was home. Now I wasn't sure where home was anymore. At 8:30 a.m., there was a knock on my cottage door. Soft, tentative. I knew it was Preston before I even looked through the peephole. He was standing there in his work clothes, suit pants and a dress shirt, no tie yet, holding 2 cups of coffee from the expensive cafe downtown that I liked. I opened the door but didn't invite him in. Hi, sweetheart. Hi, Mom, he said, offering me one of the coffees. Your usual. Caramel macchiato, extra shot. I took it, grateful despite everything. Thank you. We stood there awkwardly, mother and son, with 3 feet of space and what felt like 3 miles of emotional distance between us. Can I come in? Preston asked. Please. I've been up all night, and I really need to talk to you. I hesitated, then stepped aside. He came in and we sat across from each other in my small living room, the same way we'd sat hundreds of times before, but everything felt different now. Mom, Preston began, setting his coffee down on the side table, I need to understand what happened yesterday. I mean, really understand. Because Cassandra's version and what you told me don't match up, and I'm caught in the middle trying to figure out the truth. The truth is exactly what I told you, I said quietly. Your wife called me nobody. She tried to take control of my private financial business. She was disrespectful and dismissive, and when the bank manager asked her to leave, she threatened me. Preston winced. She says she was just trying to help, that you were being secretive about your finances, that she was worried you were making bad decisions or being taken advantage of by the bank. Preston, do you hear yourself? I asked, feeling frustration rise in my chest. She was worried I was being taken advantage of, so she tried to take advantage of me herself? That doesn't make any sense. That's not what she meant, then what did she mean? I interrupted. Because from where I was sitting, it looked like she wanted access to my money, wanted to know how much I had, wanted to control it. And when I refused, she called me nobody and said you should be handling my affairs because I'm incompetent. Preston was quiet for a moment, his jaw working as he processed this. Mom, I need to ask you something, and please don't be offended. Go ahead. How much money are we talking about? I mean, from Dad's estate. Because Cassandra seems to think there's a lot more than what you told me, and if that's true, if you've been hiding significant assets, I need to understand why. The question felt like a slap, but I kept my voice steady. I haven't been hiding anything, Preston. I didn't know the full extent of your father's estate until yesterday when the bank manager showed me. Everything was being processed by the lawyers, and I was just waiting for it to be settled. But how much? He pressed. I looked at my son, this man I'd raised to be honest and decent, and made a decision. If he needed to know, I'd tell him. But I'd make sure he understood what this information meant. Your father left me very well provided for, I said carefully. Between life insurance, retirement accounts, and investments, the total is approximately $1.85 million. Preston's eyes went wide. His coffee cup slipped slightly in his hand, and he had to catch it before it spilled. What? Almost $2 million? Mom, why didn't you tell me? Because I didn't know until yesterday, I said firmly. And because it's my money, Preston. Your father left it to me to take care of myself, to live comfortably, to have security. It's not family money. It's mine. But we've been helping you, supporting you. I live in a cottage on your property, I said, because you convinced me to sell my home and move here. I babysit your children, clean your house, do your yard work, run your errands. How exactly have you been supporting me? Preston looked stricken. Mom, we've never asked you to do those things. Cassandra asks me every day, I said, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. Every single day, Preston. Eleanor, watch the kids. Eleanor, pick this up. Eleanor, handle that. I've become unpaid labor in your household, and yesterday your wife made it clear that's exactly how she sees me. As nobody. As someone whose only value is in what she can provide. That's not true, Preston protested, but his voice lacked conviction. Cassandra appreciates everything you do. She's told me how helpful you are. Helpful, I repeated. Not valued. Not loved. Not respected. Helpful. Like a housekeeper or a nanny. Preston ran his hands through his hair, a gesture I recognized from his childhood when he was stressed or overwhelmed. Mom, I know Cassandra can be demanding sometimes. She has high standards, and she gets stressed managing the house and the kids and her work. But she doesn't mean to take advantage of you. She called me nobody, Preston, I said, and my voice broke on the words. Your wife, the woman you chose to spend your life with, called me nobody. And you're sitting here making excuses for her. I'm not making excuses, he said quickly. I'm trying to understand what happened so we can fix it. That's all I want, Mom. I want my family back together and happy. Your family, I said softly. Do you see me as part of your family, Preston? Or am I just an obligation? Someone you have to deal with because I'm your mother? Of course you're part of my family. Preston looked genuinely hurt. Mom, how can you even ask that? You're my mother. I love you. Then why didn't you defend me yesterday? The question came out barely above a whisper. When I told you what Cassandra said, why was your first instinct to doubt me? To assume there was a misunderstanding instead of believing that your wife disrespected me? Preston was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was strained. Because I didn't want to believe it. Because if I believe that Cassandra said those things, meant those things, then I have to confront the fact that my wife and my mother can't coexist in the same space. And I don't know how to handle that. At least he was being honest. I could appreciate that, even if his honesty hurt. Preston, I said gently, I need you to understand something. I'm not trying to make you choose between us. But I can't continue living like this. I can't continue accepting disrespect and dismissal just to keep the peace. Your father left me that money so I'd have options, so I'd have security, so I'd never have to depend on anyone else. And right now, I need to use those options. His face went pale. What do you mean? I mean I'm going to find my own place to live. An apartment or a small house, somewhere I can have my independence and my dignity. Somewhere I'm not treated like hired help. Mom, no, Preston said immediately, leaning forward urgently. You don't have to leave. This is your home. We can set boundaries with Cassandra, we can make changes. This isn't my home, Preston, I said, and saying it out loud made it real. This is your home. Your home with Cassandra. I'm just living in the guest cottage. And every day I stay here, I'm accepting that I'm less important than keeping your wife happy. That's not fair, Preston said, his voice tight with emotion. I'm trying to hold my family together. Can't you see that? I can see it, I said sadly. But your family shouldn't require me to make myself smaller, to accept being called nobody, to give up my self-respect. That's too high a price, even for you. Preston stood up abruptly, pacing the small living room. So that's it? You're just going to move out? Leave? What about the kids? What about Sophia and Benjamin? They adore you. The mention of my grandchildren made my chest ache. I love them too. More than anything. But Preston, your wife threatened yesterday that I wouldn't see them anymore. She used my grandchildren as a weapon. Do you really think staying here under these conditions is healthy for any of us? She was upset, Preston said weakly. She didn't mean that. Didn't she? I asked. Because it sounded like she meant every word. We stood there in silence, the weight of this impossible situation pressing down on both of us. I could see the struggle on my son's face, could see him trying to find a solution that would make everyone happy. But some situations don't have happy solutions. Sometimes you just have to choose the least painful option. I need to go to work, Preston said finally, his voice hollow. I have meetings all day. But Mom, please don't make any hasty decisions. Please give me time to talk to Cassandra, to work this out. I'm not making hasty decisions, I said. I'm making necessary ones. But I'll give you time. I'm not moving out today or tomorrow. I'll stay through the end of the month. That gives us 4 weeks to figure out the details. Preston looked like he wanted to argue, but he just nodded, his shoulders slumped in defeat. At the door, he turned back to me. I love you, Mom. Please remember that, whatever happens. I love you too, sweetheart, I said, and meant it with my whole heart, even as I was setting boundaries that would change our relationship forever. After Preston left, I sat down at my laptop and did something I hadn't done in years. I looked at apartment listings. I looked at small condos and townhouses in neighborhoods across the city. Places with 1 or 2 bedrooms, manageable spaces where I could build a new life. For the first time in 3 years, I felt a spark of excitement. Not happiness exactly, this situation was too painful for happiness, but something like anticipation. The possibility of a space that was truly mine, where no one could dismiss me or diminish me or call me nobody. Around noon, my phone rang. It was Christopher Blackwell from the bank. Mrs. Hartfield, I hope I'm not disturbing you. I wanted to follow up after yesterday's incident and make sure you're all right. His concern was genuine, and it touched me. I'm managing, Christopher. Thank you for asking. I also wanted to let you know that I've been in touch with an excellent estate planning attorney. Her name is Patricia Monroe, and she specializes in helping clients protect their assets and establish clear legal structures. I took the liberty of mentioning your situation to her, not the specific details, just that you might need someone who understands family dynamics and financial security. She's offered to meet with you this week if you're interested. That would be wonderful, I said, feeling grateful for his proactive help. Yes, please send me her contact information. I'll email it to you right now. And Mrs. Hartfield? I hope you know that what happened yesterday was completely unacceptable. You deserve to be treated with respect and dignity, and I hope your family comes to understand that. After we hung up, I found myself smiling for the first time since yesterday. Here was a stranger who was showing me more kindness and support than my own daughter-in-law had shown me in years. The next few days passed in a strange limbo. I stayed in my cottage mostly, avoiding the main house. Preston came by each morning with coffee, trying to convince me to stay, to give Cassandra another chance, to let him fix things. Cassandra herself stayed away, whether by choice or because Preston had told her to, I didn't know. On Friday afternoon, I met with Patricia Monroe, the estate planning attorney Christopher had recommended. She was a sharp woman in her early 50s, with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor that I appreciated immediately. After I explained my situation, the whole story, from moving into the cottage to the incident at the bank, Patricia nodded thoughtfully. Mrs. Hartfield, what you've described is a textbook case of financial elder exploitation in the making. Your daughter-in-law was testing boundaries, trying to establish control over your finances. The fact that she became aggressive when you resisted is very telling. But she didn't actually get access to my money, I pointed out. No, because you stopped her. But if you hadn't, if you'd been more passive or more confused about your rights, she could have easily manipulated you into giving her power of attorney or adding her to your accounts. We see this happen all the time, unfortunately. Patricia helped me set up a comprehensive estate plan over the next week. A revocable trust that protected my assets, a healthcare directive that specified my wishes, and a will that clearly outlined my intentions. She also helped me document what had happened at the bank, creating a record in case there were future issues. I'm not saying your daughter-in-law will escalate, Patricia said, but it's always better to have documentation. And I strongly recommend that you limit any discussion of your finances with family members who've shown they can't be trusted. By the end of the second week, I'd found an apartment. It was a beautiful 2-bedroom condo in a building for active adults, with a community center, a garden area, and security. The second bedroom would be perfect for when Sophia and Benjamin visited, if they were allowed to visit. I put down a deposit and signed a lease to begin April 1st. 2 weeks away. That evening, I invited Preston to the cottage and told him about my decision. He took it better than I expected, though his eyes were sad. I was hoping you'd change your mind. I know, I said gently. But this is what I need to do, Preston. For my own well-being, for my own sense of self. I can't be happy living in your guest cottage, walking on eggshells, being treated like I don't matter. You matter to me, Mom, he said, his voice thick with emotion. You've always mattered. Then respect my decision, I said. Help me move. Come visit me in my new place. Bring the children. Let's build a relationship that's based on mutual respect, not obligation or proximity. Preston nodded slowly. What about Cassandra? What about her? I asked carefully. Do you expect an apology? Do you want her to? I don't know, make amends? I thought about this for a long moment. Preston, I'd like an apology, yes. But more than that, I'd like her to genuinely understand why what she said and did was wrong. Not just apologize because you told her to, but actually recognize that she treated me like I was less than human. Do you think she's capable of that? Preston looked away, and his silence was answer enough. I didn't think so, I said quietly. So no, I'm not waiting for an apology that will never come or won't be sincere if it does. I'm moving forward with my life. On the day before my move, Cassandra finally approached me. I was packing boxes in the cottage when I heard a knock. Through the window, I saw her standing there, dressed impeccably as always, her expression unreadable. I opened the door but didn't invite her in. Cassandra. Eleanor, she said stiffly. Preston said you're moving out tomorrow. That's right. We stood there in awkward silence for a moment. Then Cassandra spoke, her words sounding rehearsed. I wanted to say that I'm sorry if anything I said at the bank offended you. That wasn't my intention. I was just trying to help. Sorry if. Not sorry that I hurt you, but sorry if you were offended. It was a non-apology, the kind people give when they don't actually think they did anything wrong but want credit for apologizing anyway. I appreciate you saying that, I said neutrally, not accepting the apology but not starting a fight either. Preston is very upset about you leaving, Cassandra continued. The children are confused. This is really disrupting our family. Our family. Not her family. Not acknowledging that I was part of it. I'm sorry the children are confused, I said. I hope you'll explain to them that their grandmother loves them very much and will see them regularly. Will you? Cassandra asked, and there was something sharp in her tone. Or is this your way of punishing us? Punishing me? I looked at her, this woman who had made my life miserable for months, who had called me nobody, who even now couldn't take genuine responsibility for her actions, and I felt nothing. Not anger, not hurt, just a vast emptiness where family feeling should have been. This isn't about punishment, Cassandra, I said quietly. This is about self-preservation. I can't live in a place where I'm not respected. I can't be around someone who sees me as nobody. So I'm choosing to be somewhere else. Fine, Cassandra said, her mask of civility slipping. Leave then. But don't expect Preston to keep running over to your new apartment all the time. He has responsibilities here, a real family to take care of. I hope he does take care of his family, I said. His wife, his children. That's exactly what he should do. And I hope he takes care of his mother too, because I'm also his family, whether you want to acknowledge that or not. Cassandra turned and walked away without another word, her heels clicking against the stone path. I watched her go, feeling a strange sense of relief. At least now the pretense was over. At least now we both knew where we stood. The next day, Preston and two of his friends helped me move into my new condo. It took most of the afternoon, but by evening, I was surrounded by boxes in my new home. My own home, where no one could diminish me or dismiss me or make me feel small. Preston lingered after his friends left, helping me unpack kitchen items. This is a nice place, Mom, he said, looking around. Good natural light. Close to shops and restaurants. It's perfect for me, I said. Not too big, not too small. Just right. Like Goldilocks, Preston said with a sad smile. Exactly like that. As he was leaving, Preston pulled me into a tight hug. I'm sorry, Mom, he whispered. I'm sorry I didn't protect you better. I'm sorry I made you feel like you had to leave. Oh, sweetheart, I said, hugging him back. This isn't your fault. This is just life. Sometimes people aren't compatible, and that's okay. What matters is that we don't let it destroy our relationship. I won't, he promised. I'll come visit every week. With the kids. And we'll have Sunday dinners here, just like we used to at your old place. I'd like that, I said. I'd like that very much. 3 months later, I was sitting in my sunny living room, drinking coffee and reading the newspaper, when my phone rang. It was Christopher Blackwell from the bank. Mrs. Hartfield, I hope you're well. I'm calling because something interesting has come across my desk that I thought you should know about. What is it? I asked, curious. Your daughter-in-law attempted to access information about your accounts yesterday. She came into the bank and told one of our tellers that she had power of attorney and needed statements for tax purposes. My blood ran cold. What happened? The teller followed our security protocols and called me immediately. I met with your daughter-in-law personally and explained that we have no power of attorney on file for your accounts, and that any attempt to fraudulently access account information is a criminal offense. She left quickly after that. Thank you for telling me, I said, my mind racing. And thank you for protecting my accounts. That's what we're here for, Mrs. Hartfield. I've added an additional note to your file about this attempted access. If she tries again, we'll be forced to file a report with the authorities. After I hung up, I sat there for a long time, thinking. Cassandra had tried to access my money. Even after everything that had happened, even after I'd moved out, she'd tried. I called Patricia Monroe, my attorney, and told her what had happened. She was silent for a moment, then said, Eleanor, I think we need to document this. Would you be willing to file a report with the police? Not to press charges necessarily, but to create a record in case she escalates? I thought about Preston, about how this would affect him, about how it might damage my relationship with my grandchildren. But then I thought about Christopher's words, this is a criminal offense. Yes, I said. Let's file a report. I need to protect myself. The police report created exactly the storm I'd expected. Preston was devastated, Cassandra was furious, and for several weeks, I didn't hear from my son at all. But Patricia had been right, having documentation was important. It established a pattern, created a record, protected me legally. Eventually, Preston reached out. We met at a cafe, neutral territory, and talked for hours. He'd been doing his own investigating after the bank incident, and he'd discovered things about Cassandra's spending habits, her credit card debt, her financial pressure that he'd been unaware of. I think she saw your money as a solution to our problems, Preston said quietly. Problems I didn't even know we had. She's been hiding our financial situation from me, and when she found out you had nearly $2 million, she saw it as her way out. I'm sorry, Preston, I said, and meant it. I know this is painful. We're in marriage counseling, he said. I don't know if we'll make it. I don't know if I can trust her anymore. But I'm trying, for the kid's sake. That's all you can do, I said gently. Try, and see what happens. 6 months after I moved out, Preston and Cassandra separated. She moved into an apartment across town, and Preston got primary custody of Sophia and Benjamin. The divorce proceedings were contentious, and I stayed as far away from them as I could, not wanting to be weaponized by either side. But through it all, Preston and I rebuilt our relationship. He brought the children to visit every Sunday, and we'd cook dinner together and play games and just be a family. The kids adjusted better than I'd expected, happy to have a grandmother who was relaxed and present instead of stressed and walking on eggshells. 1 year after the incident at the bank, I was hosting Sunday dinner when Preston pulled me aside. Mom, he said, I need to tell you something. I need to apologize, really apologize, for not believing you sooner. For not seeing what Cassandra was doing to you. For letting you be treated like you didn't matter. Preston, I started, but he held up a hand. No, let me finish. I was so focused on keeping the peace, on maintaining the image of a perfect family, that I ignored what was right in front of me. You were being exploited and disrespected in my own home, and I let it happen. I'm so sorry, Mom. I'm sorry I didn't protect you the way you always protected me. I hugged my son, this good man who'd made mistakes but was trying to do better. I forgive you, sweetheart. I forgave you a long time ago. How do you do it? He asked. How do you stay so strong? After everything that happened, you're not bitter or angry. You're just, you. I smiled. I'm strong because I chose to be. Because when Cassandra called me nobody at that bank, I decided she was wrong. I'm not nobody. I'm Eleanor Hartfield. I'm a widow, a mother, a grandmother. I'm a woman of means who deserves respect. And once I remembered that, really remembered it, everything else fell into place. I'm proud of you, Mom, Preston said. And I love you. I love you too, I said. Now come on, dinner's getting cold, and your daughter is trying to teach Benjamin how to make origami cranes. I think we should intervene before someone loses an eye. As we walked back to the dining room where my grandchildren were laughing and playing, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't felt in years. My life wasn't perfect. My family was fractured in some ways, healing in others. But I was living on my own terms, in my own space, with my dignity intact. That bank manager, Christopher Blackwell, had been right. I wasn't nobody. I never had been. And I never would be again. Epilogue: 2 years later I was in my garden plot at the condo complex, planting tomatoes, when my phone rang. It was Christopher from the bank. Mrs. Hartfield, I hope I'm not interrupting anything important. Just gardening, I said, brushing dirt off my hands. What can I do for you, Christopher? I'm actually calling with an opportunity. You know we've become friends over these past 2 years, and I've been impressed by your strength and how you handled your difficult situation. Thank you, I said, curious where this was going. The bank is starting a program to help elderly clients protect themselves from financial exploitation. We want to create educational workshops, support systems, early intervention protocols. And I immediately thought of you. Would you be willing to share your story? To help other people recognize the warning signs before it's too late? I stood there in my garden, the spring sun warm on my face, and thought about that day in the bank when everything had changed. When I'd been called nobody and had decided that wasn't acceptable. Yes, I said. I'd be honored to help. If my story can prevent even one person from being exploited by their own family, it'll be worth it. Thank you, Eleanor, Christopher said. I had a feeling you'd say yes. After we hung up, I went back to my tomato plants, but I was smiling. Life had a funny way of turning painful experiences into opportunities for growth and purpose. That evening, Preston came over for dinner with Sophia and Benjamin. The kids were getting so big now. Sophia was 10 and already talking about middle school. Benjamin was 8 and obsessed with dinosaurs. We ate pasta and salad, and the kids told me about their week while Preston helped me clean up. The kids are doing really well, I observed as we loaded the dishwasher. They seem happy. They are, Preston agreed. The divorce was hard, but I think it was the right thing. Cassandra and I are civil now, co-parenting okay. She's in therapy, working on her issues. I hope she finds peace. I hope so too, I said, and meant it. For her sake and the kids. You know what's funny? Preston said. The other day, Sophia asked me why we don't live with you. Not in a sad way, just curious. And I realized that she sees this setup, Sunday dinners, regular visits, holidays together, as totally normal. She doesn't feel like the family is broken. She just thinks this is how families are. Maybe she's right, I said. Maybe families don't have to look one particular way to be whole. Maybe we're exactly the family we need to be. Preston hugged me. Thanks, Mom. For everything. For being strong enough to leave when you needed to. For teaching me what self-respect looks like. For showing the kids that it's okay to set boundaries and demand to be treated well. As I watched Preston and the kids drive away that night, I stood on my balcony looking out at the city lights and thought about how far I'd come. 2 years ago, I'd been living in a guest cottage, being treated like hired help, accepting disrespect because I didn't think I had other options. Now I had my own home, my independence, my dignity, and a relationship with my son that was honest and real instead of based on obligation and proximity. I'd also discovered something unexpected, a sense of purpose. Through the bank's program, I'd met dozens of other elderly people who'd faced financial exploitation, and I'd been able to help some of them find the courage to protect themselves. It turned out that my painful experience could be transformed into something meaningful. My phone buzzed with a text from Preston. The kids want to know if you can come to Benjamin's dinosaur presentation at school next week. Thursday at 2 p.m. I smiled and texted back, wouldn't miss it for the world. Because that was the truth. I wouldn't miss it. I wouldn't miss any of it, the school presentations, the Sunday dinners, the holidays, the ordinary moments that made up a life. I was 72 years old, living alone for the first time in decades, and I'd never been happier. Not because my life was perfect, it wasn't. Not because my family was intact in the traditional sense, it wasn't that either. But because I was living as Eleanor Hartfield, a person of worth and dignity, someone who mattered. Not nobody. Never again nobody. Just me. And that was enough. Thank you for following my story to the end. If you've experienced something similar, family members who dismiss you, who try to control your finances, who make you feel like you don't matter, please know that you deserve better.